Well, I find it kind of ironic that the time of year when I think the garden looks its worst is the time of year when I seem to have lots of visitors who are driving by or who are coming. Actually, a lot of you come from even out of town to drive by and see my house. And I'm happy for you to do that, but definitely know that this is my least favorite time of year, and I think it's when things look their worst. Now, I don't let that bother me too much because, as you can tell from Stuart's walking across the street and heading this way, from a distance it really doesn't look too bad. I've done a little bit of clipping on the boxwoods in front, something that I had been waiting to do, but now they have a little bit better form, a little bit more of a rounded shape, so that gives some structure to the garden, which is one of the reasons I use so many evergreens, because not only do I want evergreen structure and good bones in the dead of winter, I also want good structure and good bones in the dead of summer, the dog days of summer right now, because this is when I don't want to be out here doing a whole lot, and it kind of has to hold its own. So I'm going to show you a couple of things that I do, but more importantly, I'm going to talk about some things maybe that I don't do. So this episode would be, what am I giving myself permission to do or not to do? So I am giving myself permission to not have everything be perfect, to not have everything be perfectly mulched, as long as I stay on top of bugs and any kind of fungal problems or whatever. I'm pretty good with that, and watering, of course. So my question of the day is, what are you giving yourself permission to do or not to do in your garden right now? Now, here's something I'm giving myself permission to do, and that is not really color coordinate a whole lot, because I don't know, the way things are blooming this year is very odd. So it's very hard for me to have a good color palette, strong color palette going. I like to typically have a very restricted color palette, and I just can't do that this time of year because there are so many different things coming in and out of bloom. The foxglove that pretty much have already finished. They had their peak, but now they're sputtering out some pale pink flowers. I've got some lantana, which I was hoping would be my color scheme for this time of year, but then other things have come into bloom late or are still blooming, and so that's creating what I consider to be just not a congruent color scheme, not one that I really like. So here are some of the things that are growing. I've got lots of Verbena bonariensis, and I love the way it looks right now. Mostly I just let it go crazy because it's in an area here that gets lots of really good air circulation, and so it doesn't get spider mite in this area like it used to when I had it in the backyard. But the pollinators love it. I gave all of these cushion roses a really good deadhead a couple of weeks ago, and they are blooming again. I see a little bit of sign of black spot, but I typically don't spray these because, again, they've got good air circulation out here, lots of strong sun, and whatever the problem is, I don't think it really warrants aggressive spraying. Some of my crepe myrtle are starting to come into bloom. What's interesting is I had a Diana rose here that got rose rosette, and I had to take it out, but it had apparently layered itself and started a new plant over here. So this plant is now fine, blooming in white. The original plant was where these crepe myrtles are. These are some southern living crepe myrtles that bloom white that I put in place here, and they're doing fine, and actually they're very robust. They started out to be, I think, maybe just 1 gallon plants, and they're really doing beautifully. So once this fills up and is more white, I may go back to a white and pink palette in the summer for next year. I'm not sure, but I'm giving myself permission to not freak out because all the colors aren't the way I want them. I know that's probably a little overly fastidious of me, but that's just the way I am. I've got some more crepe myrtles here blooming. I probably would have, in retrospect, planted these in white, but nevertheless, they've got this pretty dark purple foliage that looks great. Now look, here's an example, you guys, right here. See that mosquito right there? It will light but not bite. Unlike poor Stuart's just shaking his head, not being able to figure out how does that work. I keep deadheading the daisies, and the daisies just keep putting out all sorts of blooms. Once they're pretty much done blooming in August, I will cut them back hard and let some of the other stuff reveal themselves. I've got some kind of re-blooming salvia here that's purple that I love. If one of you knows the cultivar name, let me know. I bought this unmarked at a nursery. I've got two blobs of it here, and I think it looks really pretty with the Sedum Autumn Joy in the front, which has these marvelous flower heads. So here's something I'm giving myself permission to do. Number one, in terms of what I'm giving myself permission to do versus not to do, this is the time of year when I like to cut things and bring them indoors. Earlier in the spring, earlier in the summer, or not so much, or late in the spring, early summer, not so much, because there's so much going on outside. Now I don't want to be outside. I want to be inside in the cool of the air conditioner. So I give myself permission to cut masses of whatever I want, because I love the look of things cut in moss. Great big bouquets of them, great big bunches of them. So if I so chose, I would give myself permission to cut a whole bunch of these seed heads of Sedum Autumn Joy, or wait just a little bit longer, they'll start blooming in pink, and then I would cut this entire stand of them and bring them in for one massive bouquet on my library table or my dining room table or my kitchen table. So that's one thing. I would also do that same thing, if I so chose, with all of the daisies. I might even come over here and cut a bunch of branches of the Encore azaleas that are in bloom, and I would give myself permission to do that. I have been very good about harvesting all of my seed heads. I did that last week, and I even ordered some really fun seed packets, personalized seed packets off of Zazzle, so I'll be packaging those up. So I'm giving, since I've already done that, I've already saved some seed. Anything that goes to seed from now on, I probably will not cut and dry. I will just let it go to seed in place, and then later I will thin it out if I have to. So whatever goes to seed at this point, like some of that columbine, I'm giving myself permission to just let it do its thing, and I'm just not going to tend it anymore. Another thing that I'm giving myself permission to do is when I do cut back some of my boxwood, and I may come with some pretty long cuttings like this. Earlier in the spring, I would have been pretty fastidious about trying to save those cuttings and trying to transform them into a topiary, but I'm just not inspired enough to do that right now. It's just too hot. I just don't want to tend them after I would try to get them rooted. So I'm giving myself permission to just discard all of my cuttings, whether or not that's on my scented geraniums, whether or not it's on my evergreens. Most things, unless it's really prized, I'm just giving myself permission to compost the remains without feeling like I am being wasteful by not trying to transform the cuttings. So that's another thing I'm giving myself permission not to do. I'm also giving myself permission not to transplant some stuff that right now needs to be transplanted. So I've got monkey grass coming up in here, and it really needs to be removed, but it's too hot, it's too dry, and it's not really a good time to try to transplant it. So even though it's being a little bit overly aggressive right now, I'm not going to tackle that job. I will wait. So I'm giving myself permission to procrastinate and do that probably this fall. I'm giving myself permission not to rewind my hose every time, because the hose that I have up front is kind of this earthy gray, and from the street you can't see it, and I can kind of obscure it. It's a flexi hose, and I can kind of obscure it in the back, so you can't really see it. And since I'm having to water so much right now, I am giving myself permission not to put it away each time. Again, if it's not real obvious from the street and doesn't look really bad from the street, then I'm not going to worry about it, because it's all I can do to make myself come out and water right now. If I had to unwind it every single time, I'd be even less inclined to water. So I'm giving myself permission not to do that. There are other things that need to be thinned out, and I am giving myself permission not to do that right now. It's too hot, unless it's a big stand of weeds, which will take off in the heat and the dry weather. I'm not even worried about that too much, because anything in my garden that's really getting out of control is probably like a ground cover or something. And again, I'm giving myself permission to wait and do that this fall, because since it's so hot and so dry, it's probably not going to get too much worse than it is right now. Weeds are another matter. I'm giving myself permission not to deadhead some of these things as they start to fade, because I still want that pop of color. Even though this celosia is starting to get pale, I really don't mind it, because from the street you can still kind of see it, and it's just a different pale color. So I'm giving myself permission not to deadhead it. Another reason I'm not deadheading some things very specifically is because I want to leave them there for the pollinators. So it's late summer, and I will leave them there for the pollinators. I think that's a really good idea to do right now. I'm not planting. I'm giving myself permission to not plant anything else. And not only that, I'm giving myself permission to throw away and compost things that aren't looking very good. I've got some lemon cypress in the back that I have done all I could to try to keep them looking good and not crispy, and nevertheless, they just don't want to grow here. So I am not going to torture myself any longer. I'm probably going to go ahead and discard them. Another thing that I'm giving myself permission to do is, by the way, this is my neighbor's shrub, and I do have permission to do this. I just did a whole video, and Stuart can put a link to it when it's done, or you can see it this coming weekend. I'm not sure when we'll post it. But I just cut a huge bouquet of dried oak leaf hydrangeas. But if you don't have oak leaf hydrangeas, there are other things that you can take huge bouquets of, though this one will need some water and the dried hydrangeas didn't. And this is one of those things where you could take huge bouquets of these. It's a very, I think of it as, if you're familiar with the store Terrain and that book Terrain, it's a very terrain kind of look. And so I just cut massive branches of these, put them in water, slit the stems, or I could pound the stems to encourage water uptake. And then I could just put these in a huge vase, very dramatic, very terrain looking. And not only that, it's kind of good for the shrub because it will just put out new growth then. And I love these dainty, this is just about the most common abelia that you can get. If you wanted to do it, if you've got a kaleidoscope abelia or a lemon lime abelia from the Southern Living Plant Collection, you can do that too. But these are a little bit starting to get rangy, a little bit woody, but I could put these in one huge bouquet, put them on my outdoor table or the table in my studio in my office, and this would look absolutely spectacular. It's got a great late summer look, and it's something that I am giving myself permission to do, and that's cut huge bouquets of whatever looks good right now. So you guys let me know, What things are you giving yourself permission to do and not do in your gardens in late summer? And if you've stuck around, here's my fashion epilogue for today. My hat is actually, this is almost an antique. This is one of the very original Smith & Hawken products. I got it when they had their own freestanding stores. So this is a Smith & Hawken hat. My earrings, I really can't remember where they came from, but I'll see if I can find some to link to. They could have been Steinmart, they could have been Amazon, they could have been some kind of boutique, I'm not really sure. My t-shirt was from Nordstrom Rack. It's a Madewell t-shirt. I bought these in bulk. I may have talked about it a while ago. This is one that I got. I love light blue. These are also the same pants I had on in a previous video, I think. Sometimes somebody asked me, do I ever wear the same thing twice? Oh, absolutely, but probably not in the same combination. So these are Nordstrom Rack pants. They're actually Madewell brand. I like them because they are loose and easy to work in, and they're a lot more lightweight than jeans to work in. And my sandals, I've showed you before, these are Madden Girl. They are old as the hills. I got these at Steinmart a number of years ago, and I love them because I love the way I can just slip in and out of them. And yes, it's time for a pedicure. So there's your fashion epilogue for today.